Hey everybody, welcome to chapter 11 of the Myers book and social psychology. We are going to be talking about relationships, and the first part of your book spends a lot of time talking about how important relationships are. In case you didn't know, relationships are one of the most important things for our health and happiness. The notes talk about how there's a correlation between longevity and life length and health and relationships. So I have a long list of citations here. You don't need to worry about those, but basically people who have stronger social ties have been shown to have longer lives, be healthier, share problems with a confidant. That's a really important correlate. I think that a lot of having someone being happier in a relationship than not being in a relationship has to do with having someone to confide in, having a friend, someone to listen to. A couple of researchers back in the late 80s surveyed spouses of people who died of suicide or car wrecks, and those who openly expressed their grief had fewer health problems than those who bore their grief alone, which suggests that when you have someone to talk to about your pain, your stresses, it's better. And so even though these folks lost their spouses, they still had a friend or someone else to talk to, and that made them feel better. So any kind of relationship is important, especially a close relationship with someone that you feel you can confide in. In the 90s, some researchers surveyed over 700 college women who had experienced sexual trauma in childhood, and the ones who kept the secret to themselves had much more health problems, many more health issues than those who went ahead and shared that with someone close to them. So again, the confidant, the idea of someone close to you that you can share with. There's so many links with relationships and happiness. There are correlations, so note that getting into a relationship does not necessarily make you happy. Happier people may in fact attract other people to have relationships with. So it's not a causal relationship per se, but we know that there's a strong link between being in relationships of meaning to you, not necessarily romantic relationships, but all different kinds of relationships that are close, and happiness and life satisfaction and health. So in satisfying love relationships were significantly happier in life than those who were not. I'm guessing that might have been at the beginning of the relationship, but maybe not, because they were students. They probably weren't in 20-year-long relationships at that point. Also, it's been found that people in satisfying relationships cope better with life stressors. Again, probably having someone to talk to about it. And another interesting thing is that people who value relationships in life more than they do careers and money and other goals like that are actually significantly happier than so people who value relationships more than those other goals are significantly happier than those who value money and careers. And many studies have shown that for most people, when they're asked, what is the single most satisfying part of your life, people will spontaneously say either romantic relationships or friendships. So as far as just being able to pick out of everything in your life, those are the things that come up in your in the literature. So I'm looking at the first slide, and one of the most important things that we have as a species, being social creatures that we are, is the need to belong. And you guys probably remember this from the textbook, where the ostracism research to me is fascinating. I really was impressed and amazed by this, that we actually feel physical pain when we are left out. And make sure you are familiar with this virtual frisbee game. This game to me is very revolutionary in the sense that we can use this paradigm of completely fake interaction and exclusion to do all kinds of different research, and it seems like it has a lot of far-reaching implications. But to me, the most important thing was, the sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Well, it turns out that physically we do experience pain when we are left out, and one of the things that people can do to hurt us most is to exclude us. And a couple things about what gets us in relationships and what leads to friendship. Well, physical attractiveness, sadly, is one of those things that's really important in life. We can't really deny it. And in fact, in social psychology, we spend a lot of time studying it and focusing on it, not because it's a good thing, but because it's important. It's a real predictor of how likely, especially women, are to date and marry. It's correlated with all kinds of benefits in life as well as relationships. As far as friendships go, people are attracted to more attractive people, whether they think that they're going to benefit as a sort of a sidekick to that really attractive person, because the attractive persons are more likely to get discounts and freebies and, and things throughout life. Sometimes just hanging around that kind of a person gives you benefits. But also you can bask in that person's glory. And what that means is to sort of take credit for that person's successes. So even though that person is just kind of doing nothing but looking good, you can kind of be like, yeah, that's my friend. That's someone I hang with. So we are attracted to people who are physically attractive, much more so for a romantic partner than for a friend, but we still do use physical attractiveness as something that initially attracts us to someone that we want to approach for a friend. Now this is changing a little bit when you get the Facebook and you get the different LinkedIn. A lot of times there are no photographs associated, and that's cool. But a lot of times there are photographs, and one of the things that I've noticed is that women will not post any unattractive, unflattering pictures of themselves on Facebook. And if you do post an unattractive picture of a woman friend on Facebook, they will get extremely upset, because it's you're never supposed to look bad as a woman, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about here as far as the physical attractiveness stereotype, and how it's kind of it's much more important for women. Okay, so attractiveness in dating, you should be familiar with the study the book talks about. I think it was done in the 60s or early 70s. Burchide and Hatfield, I think, they did the dating study, and they found that when they sort of randomly assigned a bunch of people to be dating partners, or go to this dance and just be matched up, they just randomly matched people up, but they told them that it was based on personality. And then later they asked them, how much did you enjoy yourself? How much would you like to see this person again? And what they found was the only predictor of whether people wanted to see that person again and go on a future date was their physical attractiveness. It had nothing to do with their personality. That's unfortunate. We know that personality is important, but if you're just doing sort of a first date type of thing, and with college freshmen, I guess they're kind of shallow, they're still kind of new to the whole relationships thing, this may not go beyond college students, but I think that there's something to it. There's something also called the matching phenomenon, and there's a lot of controversy about this, but basically what it says is that people match up with people who are of their same attractiveness level. So less attractive people will be attracted to and want to mate with less attractive people, mostly because that's who they have access to. The argument is, everybody wants the most attractive person that they can get. The question is, how attractive can you go? And people say things like, he or she is out of your league. That means, usually, sometimes it means wealthier, but usually it means better looking, who literally her family made her life so miserable. She was in love with this guy, and he was not nearly as good looking as she was. She's very pretty. And even though he was great and she really, really loved him and she wanted to marry him, her family and his family they both gave them such a hard time that they gave up the relationship, because they just felt like they were going to have a miserable life. They weren't ever going to be respected as a couple, and their friends gave them a hard time. They just felt like, oh, she's going to cheat on you, or oh, you're not good enough for her. And so, that's just one example from my life, but of course you shouldn't go by one example. But the matching phenomenon is the tendency for people to match on attractiveness level in relationships. The physical attractiveness stereotype, we touched on this briefly before. I think the people who are better looking are assumed to be across the board just about better people. They are assumed to be more intelligent, more moral, more socially adept, and that's actually true. They're more socially adept, and why do you think that might be? Probably a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because they have a lot more social skill, they interact a lot more, they're engaged a lot more because people are attracted to them and wanting to talk to them a lot more. So the physical attractiveness stereotype, extremely strong. As far as assuming that what's beautiful is good. That's essentially the assumption. What's beautiful is good. It's extremely important. For example, a young woman's attractiveness is one of the best indicators of how frequently she dates. It's not quite as important for men, but it still is important. Are more concerned with physical appearance than men for the reasons that we talked about, and we're going to talk about more in chapter 5 at the end. 90% of all cosmetic surgery is done for women, and that's because women are actually, under a lot of pressure to look beautiful, and they're not supposed to age, and they're not supposed to have imperfections, and so those things are all very difficult and stressful for women. All right, so the stereotypes about beautiful people, then the physical attractiveness stereotype, what's beautiful is good. It's called a halo effect, and basically the idea is that anytime we see someone with a positive characteristic, we think all kinds of good things about them. And so if someone is famous, we usually think that they're awesome in a lot of different ways. So if someone is beautiful, we think that they're awesome in a lot of ways. There is one exception, and I guess I'll just tell you about it in class. I'll make someone attractive. I'm looking at the 4th slide. Symmetry, everyone talks about symmetry as making you attractive, but in fact, what it is that asymmetry makes us unattractive. If your face is all, like, well, I'll love it, and then you don't look attractive. But you can actually still be attractive with a little bit of asymmetry. If you take an unattractive face and make it symmetrical, take one half, the better half, whichever one that is, and double it so it's the same thing on both sides in a picture, then that person actually can look fairly attractive, even if they are relatively unattractive to begin with. But just having symmetry does not alone make a face attractive. It helps. Another thing is averageness. Extremely big eyes. I was just watching, what is the movie with Igor in it? But he's got the huge eyes. It's better to have some, extremely nice features, but not too extreme. Averageness is actually better. When they take lots of computerized images of faces and they average them together, the most average is actually better looking, because it takes the different skin tones and it averages them out, and it takes the different nose sizes and averages them out, and they ultimately end up being a very attractive face. And what they end up often looking like is having several important characteristics. Neonatal characteristics, that means characteristics of a newborn, so large eyes but not gigantic, popping out of your head eyes, and smooth skin, and little small button nose, all those things, the neonatal characteristics. Newborns are extremely attractive. If you think about it, they are extremely demanding, and if they weren't really cute to us, we would probably get rid of them as a species. As awful as that sounds, they have evolved to be as cute as they possibly can be, so we are attracted to them. And in fact, less attractive babies are abused and neglected and abandoned significantly more than attractive babies. And attractive babies are treated substantially better by nurses and doctors and everybody, and the parents even, than less attractive children. It's sad, but it's true. We have a very strong bias. I'm trying to tell you, it's a really strong bias. So neonatal features on an adult are attractive. So if you have large eyes and smooth skin and a small nose, those are 3 components that make you look attractive. Now, if you look like an infant, because there are some people who are baby faced, but if you look like an infant, then that's a little bit odd if you truly look infantile. So in order to also be attractive, you want to also have, in addition to the neonatal characteristics, you want to have sexually mature characteristics. For men, this is a strong jaw, maybe a little hint of facial hair. I'm noticing that the beards are coming back. And for women, it's high cheekbones and pouty lips, for both men and women. Who doesn't love pouty lips, right? So the idea is sexually mature. So even though you have large eyes and a small nose and smooth skin, you don't look like a baby. You still look like you look like you're a grown-up. And then finally, emotionally expressive characteristics, like a really broad smile. I'm thinking Julia Roberts, if you guys remember who she is. A really broad smile and arched eyebrows. It makes you look approachable. So even if you aren't nice, one of the things that makes you look more attractive, in addition to neonatal and sexually mature characteristics, is to look approachable, to look emotionally expressive, to look, not necessarily available, but like you're approachable, like you're not an ice queen or king. Okay, so those are what makes someone attractive, in case you wondered. And people say, oh, it's, there's so much individual variability in terms of what people like, but in fact, there's a lot of consensus. Okay, so I have on the slide best. What's beautiful is good, but it's bad if you use your powers for evil. So technically, if we consider physical attractiveness a superpower, which it's not, but in a way it kind of is an advantage that gives you lots of benefits, you can't use your powers for evil, and I'll tell you about that study in class. It also is not long lasting, so a good looking person has a lot of advantages in short interactions and job interviews and even things like getting raises and whatnot, but it's most powerful for first impressions. You're gonna have the most bang for your buck as far as your looks when you first meet somebody. If you open your mouth and you're a total jerk, it doesn't matter how beautiful you are. They're still they'll be more likely to be nice to you than if you're ugly and a jerk, but after a while, it will not make a relationship last. It will not make, a working relationship, a coworker still, continue to like you. And in fact, you can start to look less attractive over time if your personality is awful. And then also on the slide it says that attractive people are assumed to have a higher IQ, but this is not true, but they do have better social skills. And we talked about that self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I wanted to ask you a question, and I want to talk about this in class. Given what I've mentioned, previously, and also right here, and what you've read in the book, based on all those things regarding physical attractiveness, do you think that the prejudice, the bias in favor of physically attractive people rivals racism and sexism in our culture? And do you think that we will ever get rid of any of these biases, these prejudices? And if so, which one do you think is going to go away first? So just think about that. Okay, so one of the least sexy things I can tell you about relationships is, honestly, right place, right time. You're going to be friends with the person who is sitting next to you. You're going to be much more likely to talk to the person at the lunch table who is near you or who is sitting at the bus station with you. Literally, proximity is one of the biggest predictors besides physical attractiveness. But first, you actually have to be, proximal to that person. That will predict a friendship. And again, the physical attractiveness only gets you so far. So first of all, you just sort of have to be in the same place at the same time. Some early studies by Festinger, who did the cognitive dissonance stuff, found that people in dorms who had the most friends were people who were by the elevator and by the Coke machine, because people were frequently in those areas. People who were down the hall, all by themselves at the end, didn't know very many people. And literally it's just because they would randomly bump into people, and so they had more possibility, more opportunity to meet individuals. Again, we talked about physical attractiveness already. That does lead to attraction. Interacting with people, obviously, again, having the opportunity to interact with a number of people, and mere exposure. Merely being exposed to something makes us attracted to it. It could be anything. It could be a song. It could be, they've done a lot of research with Chinese characters and Americans who don't read Chinese, and they've just, sort of shown them either subliminally is the most common way to do it, but also they've just sort of had people look at a lineup and then later ask them which ones they preferred, and they prefer the ones that are familiar. So the mere exposure effect is basically an effect of familiarity. And so if you see the same person walking by over and over again, you may eventually find them attractive or be attracted to, talk to them because they seem familiar to you. They seem safe. Now, we can talk about why that would be an advantage, why we would like the familiar as opposed to the exciting and spontaneous and new, and we can talk about that in class as well. So mere exposure, I have a study that I want to talk to you guys about with rats and Mozart in class. Hopefully we will have time to talk about that.